Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Take Juan. Okay, it's been a while since I've done this, and I've been thinking, what should be the movie that brings me back? What should be the first movie that I review when I come back to Take Juan? And then I realized, the first movie I ever reviewed for the show was Elvis, directed by Baz Luhrmann, which tells the story of the one and only Elvis Presley. So I figured, what better way to come back than by reviewing Priscilla, which tells the story of Priscilla Presley, the wife of Elvis Presley. So, without further ado, here is my review of Priscilla. Priscilla was directed by Sofia Coppola, who directed some great films such as The Virgin Suicides, Marie Antoinette, and my personal favorite of hers is Lost in Translation. Absolutely beautiful movie. I would highly recommend you all to watch it if you haven't already. Oh, and by the way, for those of you who don't know, Sofia Coppola is also, of course, the daughter of the one and only Francis Ford Coppola, the director of the Godfather movies, The Conversation, Apocalypse Now, that's where the last name comes from. But the point is, her most recent film is Priscilla, and I think this movie is good enough, but it is very much a mixed bag. There are many things that I very much enjoy, but there are also many things that I didn't quite work for me. I guess I'll begin by talking about the lead performance from Kaylee Spaney. Yeah, that is her name. That performance was absolutely incredible. She nailed it when trying to be Priscilla. She really became Priscilla. The subtlety of her emotions and the subtlety of her performance was something that really shined through and is something that I would really like to highlight. She won Best Actress at the Venice Film Festival, and I think there's a good reason why. She was absolutely amazing. And this is not a showy performance. There's not a lot of showy, big explosions of emotions. It is very subtle. It is very under the surface, but yet it is still there. Now, the next two things that I really freaking enjoyed about the movie are the production design and the costume design. I thought the production design was absolutely amazing. The sets were incredible. They look colorful, beautiful, pretty, lavish, opulent. Very much what, the settings would have been like in real life. I'm not really sure if they shot this movie in Graceland, the home of, Elvis and Priscilla Presley, or if they recreated Graceland, but either way, they did a great job of bringing Graceland to life. So the sets, absolutely incredible. And the costumes, just as incredible. The way this film recreates some of the most iconic costumes from Priscilla Presley was honestly breathtaking and incredibly well made. So, kudos to those department, you nailed it. Now, something else that I would like to highlight, and I think is what I love the most about this movie, is the sense of claustrophobia and the feeling of claustrophobia that this movie gives you. Because, for those of you who don't know, this movie, Priscilla, focuses on Priscilla as being trapped in this gilded cage. Yes, her cage is made out of gold and she has all the money she could ever want, but it is still a cage nonetheless. She feels trapped. She feels like she can't have a normal life because she is married to Elvis Presley, and that comes with some expectations, I guess, or some things that she is forced to do. So she very much feels trapped, and I feel like this movie did a great job at making us, the viewers, feel equally as trapped and equally as claustrophobic as the main character. The cinematography is very claustrophobic. There are a lot of close-ups. We are always very close to Priscilla. But also, the way the film is structured, there are huge chunks of the movie where we don't leave Graceland. The camera is literally trapped inside these four walls along with Priscilla. So that sense of claustrophobia I thought was beautifully conveyed, and I thought was just very, very well made. That said, those were the positives. Sadly, there are other things that didn't quite work for me in this movie. And I guess the first thing I will say is the performance from Jacob Elordi as Elvis Presley. And I will start by saying that I know, it's not his fault. I can see that he's doing his best, and I can see that he's really trying, but it is not his fault that he is acting as Elvis Presley the year after Austin Butler gave us the definitive Elvis Presley performance in Baz Luhrmann's Elvis. When I was watching the movie, it always felt like, oh, this is Jacob Elordi pretending to be Elvis Presley. But when I watched Austin Butler, once again, it felt like, this is not Austin Butler pretending to be Elvis Presley. This is Elvis Presley. He became Elvis Presley somehow. So once again, not his fault, but it is what it is. He acted as Elvis Presley the year after Austin Butler, and in my opinion, he didn't do as good of a job. Now, the next things that didn't quite work for me, and I would say the biggest thing that didn't quite work for me, was the script. The script for Priscilla, I'm sad to say this, but the script for Priscilla is an absolute mess. It is incredibly messy, and I think what worked the least for me was the structure. The structure of Priscilla is all over the place and not in a good way. The best way I could explain it is the film takes a long period of time. We spend a long period of time focusing on the courting of Priscilla Presley and, how Elvis and Priscilla became a thing. And then it also spends a long period of time on the first couple of months of Priscilla living in Graceland. So all of that is like the biggest chunk of the movie. This is a 1 hour, 50-minute film. And I would say that like an hour and 10, an hour and 20 minutes are all focused on that. Elvis and Priscilla becoming a couple and the first couple of months of Priscilla living in Graceland. But then, after those chunks have been explored, it honestly feels like Sofia Coppola realized, oh my god, we only have 30 more minutes left of the movie and we still have all of this story from Priscilla Presley's life that we still haven't tackled. So then she just started rushing and, towards the end, it felt like it was a non-stop montage showing you bit after bit, anecdote after anecdote of Priscilla Presley's life. And it just felt incredibly disjointed, especially when compared to, the first hour and 10 minutes of the movie. In the last 30 minutes, the film very quickly rushes you through Priscilla and Elvis getting married, Priscilla getting pregnant, they have a baby, Elvis cheats on Priscilla stays alone, she wants to leave, they fight, and it's so fast-paced, and it is, so rushed. I guess that is the right way to say it. It feels rushed. And I know what you're probably thinking. The Elvis movie that came out last year from Baz Luhrmann, that movie was incredibly hectic and was incredibly rushed. We could barely stay in any specific moment because we were instantly jumping from one scene to the next one, from past to the future, from present to the past. It was hectic, it was energetic, there was barely any time to breathe. But I think what bothers me here in Priscilla that didn't bother me in Elvis is, at least in Elvis, that was the entirety of the movie. The entire film was hectic. The entire film was frenetic. That was very much its style. But here in Priscilla, you have 1 hour and 10 minutes or 1 hour and 20 minutes that are very methodical, very conventionally paced, and then out of nowhere, the last 30 minutes are just like this non-stop rush where, once again, it feels like Sofia Coppola is rushing to cram as much movie into this, to cram as much story into this movie as possible. Now, something else that didn't work for me about the script is, sadly, many of the scenes ended up feeling repetitive or pointless, in my opinion. This movie, for those of you who don't know, is based on a book written by Priscilla Presley, a book called Elvis and Me, or Elvis and I, something like that, written by Priscilla Presley. And when I was watching this movie, I guess the best way I could explain it is when I was watching this film, I never felt like Sofia Coppola had like, okay, yes, this is what we're building up to. This is my thesis statement. This is what I'm trying to say with this film. And then all of these are scenes that help me reach that point, that help me convey that message. It never felt like that. It didn't really feel like the movie was building up to anything. It just felt like, honestly, it felt like Sofia Coppola just read the book and she was like handpicking this chapter, this anecdote, and this anecdote, not because they helped her make her point, but because she just found those interesting. And they are good anecdotes, but they end up becoming repetitive, After a while, you kind of feel like one scene after the other are saying pretty much the same thing in a slightly different way. So by far my biggest problem with Priscilla is the script. The structure is an absolute mess, and many of the scenes, in my opinion, feel repetitive and pointless. Now, there is one last problem that I have with Priscilla. There is one last thing that I have to highlight because honestly, it sticks out like a sore thumb, and that is the music, or I guess I should say the lack thereof. Because yes, this movie, Priscilla, about Priscilla Presley, doesn't feature a single Elvis Presley song. And that could be an interesting thing to do, telling the story of Priscilla Presley, but not showing any of Elvis's music, reframing the story, focusing on Priscilla. Elvis doesn't really matter. That could have been interesting. That said, a lot of this movie is focused on how Priscilla can't avoid Elvis Presley. The fact that as regardless how hard she tries in certain scenes, she just can't escape the influence of Elvis Presley. She sees him on TV, she sees him on newspapers, she sees him in the covers of magazines, she hears his music on the radio. Elvis is everywhere. She can't escape him. That said, the fact that there's not a single song from Elvis Presley doesn't really help drive that point. Now, I understand that this is not the movie's fault. I understand that the Elvis estate, the Presley estate, apparently they didn't allow this movie to feature any of Elvis Presley's songs. I do think that is something that stuck out like a sore thumb through the entirety of the movie, especially if you're making such a big deal about highlighting how Priscilla cannot escape Elvis, how Elvis is everywhere. But yet, there's not a single Elvis song. I don't know. Felt a bit weird to me. I guess in a thumbs up, thumbs down world, I would give Priscilla a thumbs up. I think there is just enough stuff for me to say that this movie is fine. It is enjoyable enough. Once again, the lead performance is incredible. The set design is amazing. The production design is gorgeous. The costumes are absolutely incredible. And then also, once again, that sense of claustrophobia is something that is not easy to do, and this movie pulled off very, very expertly. So there is just enough good stuff for me to say this film is fine, for me to say this film is good enough. That said, it is very much a mixed bag. Considering that, if I were to give a score to Priscilla, I would give it a 6 out of 10, which means I think this movie is fine. It's good enough. But yeah, that has been my review of Priscilla. Stay tuned for more reviews. Goodbye.